Well, and there's a great quote, right? I want them to have the best of me, not the rest of me.
What's up, deal makers? We just finished Ask Alex number 57, and this was our first webinar of the new year. Man, we had a big special guest on here, Steve Trang, and this guy is a big sales leader in the community. So, Alex, what were your biggest takeaways from this webinar today?
Oh man, what an amazing webinar to start the year off, right, Will? I mean, Steve Trang, he got the podcast. We covered how that's been great for his brand. He went to very specific details about sales strategies, how to become a better quote unquote closer as an investor, right? And then also, talked about his workshop coming up that we got the chance to attend, which has helped us make some more money as well. Check out the webinar and check out Steve Trang. Let's go. Aloha. We are gonna have Steve Trang on today, you guys. Oh my God, I'm so excited. What's up, everybody? Oh man, today is gonna be amazing. You're gonna learn so much. I love Steve Trang. Everything he teaches real estate investors, help them close more deals. How's everybody doing? As always, go ahead and use the chat. Let us know where you're from. Just gotta get my man and my co-host, Mr. Will Wall, in the building. And then we'll get proceeded to interviewing Mr. Steve Trang, you guys. I'm so excited because I think just being able to talk to people in a more persuasive way is so important in this business. All right, so here he is. So yeah, we're gonna give you guys an update as usual. And we ended the year off with a bang. I hope everybody had a safe and happy new year. We're starting off with a bang already. We got a new purchase. What's up, my man, Will?
What's up, Alex? How you doing, my man?
I am excellent. Thank you. Happy New Year to the deal makers. This is our first official webinar, and we're for 2022, and we are starting off with a bang with Mr. Steve Trang, and that rhymes.
That does rhyme, and was not planned, but yeah, we are excited for this webinar today, guys. Should be a good one. We'll have Steve Trang joining us here in a second, and again, guys, I think the big trending theme here is that the tribe asks and will continue to deliver. So if you guys need help on sales, I've seen people asking for help on closing, for things like that, on contracts. And so if you guys need help, we'll continue to kind of try and bring in those people that we can, that are going to help you guys as you guys kind of grow in your real estate careers, because that's the ultimate goal, right? Is we want to help see you guys be successful as we've been able to do this past year, right, Alex?
Absolutely. No, you're right. We pay and we invest into these programs, into these masterminds, into being around these other high-level entrepreneurs, so we can obviously get to their levels, and we build connections, right? And we're able to share that with the tribe, with the deal makers, because it allows them to take advantage of some of that wisdom that we're getting from other people, and just kind of throwing the rope down the real estate mountain, as I like to say. We're getting some rope thrown down to us, Will, with our mentors, and they're throwing a little rope down to help everybody up a little bit faster on this real estate investment mountain we're all climbing.
Each one teach one, right? If everybody throws something back for the next guy, it's a little bit easier. So guys, Steve's in the room. We'll get him in just a second. Before we do, let's give a quick update on you, Alex. Obviously, you're out and about. So what kind of happened last year to end the year, and then going into this year, and then we'll go ahead and get Steve welcomed on. In the meantime, Alex, go ahead and make me host when you get a chance, and we'll get things rocking and rolling, guys.
Yeah, for sure. Well, the main thing is we ended the year off with a bang. We bought 3 houses just in the last week, one to start off the year, another 2 last week of the year, basically right as we our last webinar of the year. And then also, got to hang out with you for a little bit of time, flew over from Maui, got to hang out with you for a couple of days. We went to that investor gala over there in, I think it was the Grove, and met with a lot of people that we either see at the webinar or on social media. So that was cool. And then I flew back to Guadalajara because I wanted to spend New Year's here with family. Also had a good time. I ran into a friend of mine, though. It was interesting that he's a real estate investor, but more of a, I guess you would say, passive. He has his own business in Los Angeles, and I hadn't seen this guy in 10 years. I'm like, dude, this is so cool. We got to hang out at the club. We exchange numbers. He invited me out to his lake home over here in Chapala, and oh man, it was so cool. I didn't end up seeing his property, but just that connection. I'm sure when I'm in LA, we'll go out to dinner again. And so that was kind of random. And I got to spend time with some family. But dude, really, this is about Steve. Let's get him into the screen. Let's start sharing some wisdom for the tribe. But I'm super excited about interviewing him because I have my own selfish questions, and I know you do too, Will.
Yeah, let's go ahead and bring on Steve. And You know, guys, again, I think this is an exciting webinar. We're starting off the year with somebody that's, you know, definitely done a lot in real estate. So welcome, Steve, and thanks for joining us here today, man.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Good stuff, man. So obviously, I know we were just kind of kicking things off with a quick update from Alex. Do you want to give us a kind of quick update? And you know, usually we like to give kind of you know, people a brief minute or two to kind of trickle in here as the hour starts. But in the meantime, why don't you kind of give like I said, a brief update on 2022 for you, Steve? What's, you know, kind of on your plate, and a little bit of a history, you know, kind of background, what's been kind of going on with you here this past couple of years?
I mean, this year, well, I guess the big thing for me was in December, we had Gary Harper come out, you know, talking about reaching up and to grab rope and then, you know, handing it down. So Gary coaches our organization. And so he came in and he basically redid everything. So I officially got fired from all my companies, right? Which is kind of the goal down the road. You just don't expect it to happen. And so he came in and, you know, we got our wholesaling company, our brokerage, our title company, our education side. And he basically said, you've hired people, you've trained them up, they're good at what they do. They've all been in that position for over a year. Like, why are you not letting go? I was like, I don't know. So, so now officially I've let go. So, I'm no longer actively involved on day-to-day operations in any of the companies except for coaching. That's really, and it's really just fulfilling, right? So doing content and fulfillment, and all the other companies are someone else's responsibility, and I'm here if they need me, but for the most part, they're running the operations.
And we love to hear that, because, you know, I mean, that's obviously, you know, everybody's goal, right? And we'll kind of get into that in a little bit down the line. I mean, you know, like you mentioned, the companies that you do own, so it's several companies and you know, several different businesses that you kind of have gotten to the point now where you operate, and it doesn't get that way without, you know, like you said, having a coach, having mentors that kind of show you how to do that. And you know, Alex, that's our goal this year too, right? Is to continue to kind of build those systems out so that we can continue to do our goals. And our goals, one of those this year was to mentor, you know, 25 people. And we've been able to grow this, you know, webinar to 20, 30, 40 people every week. And, you know, a Facebook group of about 600 people now that are, you know, getting to learn and getting to get some feedback. So we appreciate you kind of joining us, Steve, and would love you to kind of give a brief background of kind of, you know, some of those companies, because I know you started as a realtor and self-proclaimed horrible realtor, right? And you know, Alex and I will be the first ones to agree, like, you know, both of us have had real estate licenses at one point, and, you know, it just didn't cut it for either of us as well. So I think you were the best of the three of us by far. But tell us kind of how you went from that to where you are now, right?
Yeah, so I did the realtor thing, you know, like a lot of people reading Rich Dad Poor Dad, got into real estate, but for whatever reason got distracted, you know, became a realtor instead of buying properties. So I did that full time from 2007 to 2013, you know, and did really well. Had some really good runs. There were multiple years where we were doing 100 houses a year as on the realtor side, but it was not fulfilling. For the most part, it sucked. You went from having one boss at a company to every client is a boss now. So it was not the ideal situation. And once I started buying houses and wholesaling them before wholesaling was a word, it became less patient. And the more deals you do, the more houses you wholesale or flip, the less patience you have for regular buyers and sellers and their pickiness, which they're allowed to have it. It's just I'm not the guy to give them that patience. So, you know, discovered PPC, buying houses, just trying to get more listings. And when I was doing my own PPC, I was doing, you know, buy my house, sell my house fast, blah, blah, blah. And this is back in the time where it was predominantly just me versus Sean Terry in Phoenix. And it was $2 a click, $12 a lead. God, I would kill somebody to get that back. You know,
I was gonna say, man, I mean, those rates are a lot higher now.
Yeah. So,
Steve, didn't you have the guarantee?
yep,
Like
your household guarantee or I'll buy it.
Steve Trang would buy the house if I can't sell it, right? So like that was
Yeah.
the original kind of Steve Trang listing was like, look, man, if I can't sell it, if I can't find a buyer, I will be the buyer.
Yep. Yep. Your home sold guarantee or I'll buy it was the foundation for us buying houses, because people were telling us, well, I don't want to wait 90 days. I don't want to wait 120 days. I want you to buy my house today. Like, no, you don't. I'm paying a lot less. You're gonna walk away with less money. Like, no, I want you to buy my house today. So I was like, all right, well, if I'm gonna buy your house today, this is the price. And they agreed to it. And the first time I was floored. Second time I was still floored. But after a while, I was like, man, I'm paying too much. Too many people are saying yes. So I lowered my offers from 80% to 75%, and we still ran out of money. And that's when we had to start wholesaling. That's when I started wholesaling to Jamil, who was a Zillow lead, back in 2013. He was someone that called me on Zillow because I was wholesaling one of these houses. And he bought it for me. I was like, man, I'm familiar with these wholesalers. I'm not a big fan of you guys, right? I'm a broker, right? At this time, I'm not a big fan of you guys, but if you guarantee me that you'll close on this, I will send you. If you guarantee that you'll close on all my deals, I will send you everything first. And so he did, and he would wholesale them. But if you couldn't wholesale them, same thing, he would close on it. So
you had that guarantee on the back end. You offered it on the front end. So you're like, look, no matter what, like I'm not getting stuck with this house. I'm going to pass this through the funnel, wholesale it, like you said, maybe before that was even a thing, and you had the disposition side set up as well. So that's a a good way to kind of run the sales process, right?
Yeah, and I think right now a lot of people that are wholesaling, they may be potentially flying in blind, right? But if you got a buyer behind you, and you got a good relationship, you can ask them like, what are you willing to pay, and then back in your offer based off that number. So that's what I was doing with Keegley. After a while, I was like, all right, well, what's the number you can guarantee? And then I will go and try to lock it up. And I wasn't asking for 10 or 15 that time. I was asking for 3 or 5. So I did not know what I was doing. So as long as I can make, a quick 5, I was happy. So
yeah, and again, you're looking at the realtor commission initially, and you're like, look, if I can get something better or closer to that with less hassle, would I consider that? And you probably would. And then you realize how low you're scraping the barrel and said, man, I should be asking for much more, right?
Hey, you learn. You learn when you see the HUDs.
That happens to a lot of agents. They learn, right?
And honestly, that's kind of why I got in the game. I was an agent. I was doing short sales, and I was seeing the investors buy them. And I'm like, I'm on the wrong side of this coin over here, man. This is like they're making 10 times what I'm making, and I'm doing just, especially during short sales. You remember that, Steve? Or like,
oh yeah,
you're working for a long time to get paid.
I'm doing 10, 20, 30 times the work for 1/10 the pay.
Yeah.
And you're seeing the HUD at the end of it, and you're seeing it, and you're like, wait, why does that say that much money is ending up in this guy's pocket, or that much equity is going to this guy? And then you see
and I was never upset about it, right? It was never like you're making too much money. It was never that. It was like, wait a minute, I'm doing this wrong.
I could definitely learn from that guy. I could pick up a couple little pieces from that guy and really kind of piece this together myself.
Exactly. So that's how I transitioned, was from realtor to the wholesaler, was just seeing how much was consistently made, because I thought it was a fad, honestly. My cousin was telling me about it in 2007, 2008. It's like, that's not gonna last. Clearly I was wrong, right? So, but that's how I transitioned to it. It was buying houses on accident.
And I think that's a killer way to kind of look at the transition, right? And then obviously at some point you decided, look, like I've figured this side out. Now I want to start coaching people. And that's, where you kind of develop the podcast, disruptors, your coaching platform, everything.
Well, it was a pretty wide gap, actually. So, even those whole time I was buying houses, I had a brokerage. So I started a brokerage around the same time. And I had a whole bunch of realtors that wanted to work with me. And so I was coaching them up on how to run a business, right? Not how to be a better realtor necessarily, but how to run a business. And I was doing that for a long time. And I was losing money every year, honestly, as a broker. The first 5 years of my career as a broker, I lost money every single year. I was robbing Peter to pay Paul consistently. And my best friend was telling me, like, you need to shut that thing down. This is stupid. This is, why are you wasting your time with this? And I was telling him, like, I'm getting fulfilled. I'm doing what I like to do, what I love to do, which is teach. He's like, yeah, but you're not making money on it. Like, go figure something else that you love, But that was the foundation for when I did eventually launch coaching in 2018, that I already had all of these years of practice mentoring and coaching people, right? I went from coaching realtors to wholesalers, but I had this foundation, and I wanted to be a teacher in high school, but knowing how much teachers made, I knew that wasn't really a viable option. And so I get to do now what I love to do and get compensated for it. So it's a win-win.
I
Well,
love
how
how
did
you
the
mentioned too,
podcast fit in there? Because
foundation.
that's really how I came across you, Steve. I
Mhm.
started, I was working for an investment company on 2018, 19. And then, I just came across your podcast, and it was just like you and Bigger Pockets. It was just like 1-2 punch, like all day long. I was like working as an acquisitions manager as, I was getting after it, getting deals. And I listened to your podcast and Bigger Pockets like all day, all night. Where did that kind of come into place? Because I know you started the coaching in 2018. So you started the podcast, it was before that. Or around that time?
So let me take a step back. Coaching was 2019. So podcast was 2018. So I
Okay.
launched a podcast in May of
Podcast.
18, and then launched the coaching in May of 19. And the only reason why I did it was I had so many people asking for it, and that's like, it sounds like a total cop out because everyone says that, but legitimately, like, so many people were asking me for it. And I didn't want to do it until I spoke at Max Maxwell's event, We Live 19. And when I spoke at Max Maxwell's event, he asked me to come on and speak. I was like, all right, what can I deliver? I was like, let me go ahead and talk about sales. And when I did that, I had so many people like, wow, like that changed the game for me. And not just that, I had so many people like tagging me on social media. It's like, I use this line I learned from Steve to lock up this contract. Like, wow, like this is really impactful and it's helping a lot of people. And that was when it's like, okay, because that was March. I was like, all right, I mean, if people are getting value from it, this isn't like me pushing it. If people are getting value from something I did for free, and people are demanding that I have a coaching program, kind of like those people are demanding me buy their houses, it's like, all right, if people will pay for it, then I will do it. And that's how it started.
And that's got to be fulfilling, right? You're on a stage, Max Maxwell probably having a pretty big event, and you're up there and a lot of people are tagging
1,000
you.
people.
Like,
It was nerve-wracking.
yeah. And you're like, dude, everybody's tagging me like Steve's lying. And I mean, you'd think this was like you said, a cop out or something from Steve, but it's true. I mean, like when I'm sitting there on the phone, I'll tell my guys and I'm like, dude, watch me drop Steve's line on him right here. Like, watch me drop this reversal on here. Like, watch me scorch the earth right now, like Steve does. And like, I'll just like, I'll mute the convo with the seller and I'll be like, watch this one, guys. And I'll just like directly, like you're saying, like videoing you and being like, here I am, I'm doing a Steve's move. So I think that's, not a cop out at all. I think it's well-deserved. And I think people have a fascination, right, with the sales side of things. Because it's not just all, hey, I can get a real estate transaction going, but a lot of it really is sales and marketing and how well you can do those, right?
Absolutely. And every business is sales and marketing. A lot of people, if you ask them what business they're in, they'll tell you, I'm a real estate investor, I'm a realtor, I'm a dentist, and whatever. Like, no, everybody's in the sales and marketing business. And I got really good at marketing. Like I said, I was doing a lot of transactions as a realtor, and I did my own PPC, right, to get these seller leads. But I sucked at sales, and that's because I was an engineer. This is not my forte. But because it was my weakness, I had to work so hard in it that I can actually teach it, because I actually had to work on every single part of it to get the sales side.
So you had to master that craft, sharpen your tools. I love that, right? Because some people think like, I can't become a sales guy. It's too hard. It's, not everybody's a sales guy, but you weren't either. And so you became a sales guy, and now you became a sales, mentor to the point where, like you said, you're now coaching people and really kind of fulfilling yourself, right?
Yep, absolutely. Very rewarding.
So I love that. I know, Alex, one of your big goals, right, is mentoring people. It gets lonely, on the mountain. You want to bring other people up along with you and show people. And I'm sure, Steve, that's why, starting off with you probably, were really getting fulfilled with helping realtors build their business, because it's not like you were coaching, real estate principles and practice, right? You were actually showing these people like, hey, this is how to build a business out of yourself, not how to sell a house. You should have already known how to do that.
Honestly, guys, it sounds cliche. It really does. But once you do this business, good enough for a certain amount of time, like, you're not starving anymore. I mean, it's just like at some point in time, you're being a little bit greedy, or just not, helping people, if you're really good at something, to be able to share that in some way. I challenge people all the time, Steve. I'm like, hey, if you're good at this and you're not posting stuff on social media, or you're not seeing how you could actually, again, sounds cliche, make the world look better, then really, what are you doing? Because clearly, like, if you're great at something, you can't share that with people, and you're withholding that value from the world in many respects. So I
Absolutely.
challenge people when they're that great at something and they're not really active, or they're not building out some form of kind of community or tribe that they can kind of help and teach, whether that be for free or for paid, whatever that is, just, bringing other people up in the mountain like we just described. But I'd really like to kind of, I know you're master at sales. I want to give the tribe here some more kind of tactics, techniques, stuff that you're teaching some of the, I know we don't have a lot of time today, but how would you describe maybe some of these new errors that maybe these investors are making within the sales process? And I know you teach a lot to direct to seller, but if you could maybe touch a little bit more of just the sales in general, because I know we talk to agents, we talk to other wholesalers, because what is that? What can you provide as far as any specifics on that?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things is, and this was my biggest struggle, honestly, for most of my career in sales, was being very understanding when they tell you they need to think about it. That was probably like the thing that probably cost me the most. And on top of that, believing people when they told me that they would call me later. Right? I think the combination back to back. And so what I learned is that when people tell you they need to think about it, really you just need to hear, I'm not sold, because we know people buy emotionally and they justify intellectually. So when they tell you I need to think about it, that just means that they haven't been sold. They haven't been able to convince themselves now to take action. And because they have not been able to convince themselves to take action today, then they are not going to be able to convince themselves to take action with you later on when you're not there selling yourself. And so I think the first thing was not accepting I need to think about it. And I wish I had pressed harder before, but I didn't want to be a pushy salesperson. And so when I learned how to set the expectations in the first 5 to 15 minutes, now I'm no longer this pushy salesperson at the very end, like, Alex, I need you to sign. Like, I'm not leaving out of here. I'm not leaving here without a contract, right? Because that's kind of how I felt I needed to be, but I didn't feel comfortable doing that. But now I just say in the first 5 to 15 minutes, hey, Alex, I just need to know, like, do you feel comfortable telling me yes or no today? Because if you're not feeling comfortable telling me yes or no today, that's all right. It's just, I'm going to go somewhere else where I can find a seller that's willing to say yes or no today, right? And we obviously say it with much more professional courtesy and professionalism, but at the end of the day, we're finding out up front whether there's someone that's willing to commit today. Because what I was doing before is I would meet with them and I would drop a low number that they weren't ready to hear. And I wouldn't vet that they didn't have to run this by a sibling or a son or a daughter or whatever. And so when they told me they needed to think about it or run this by this other person, I was like, well, shoot, what am I going to do? So now, you just say, hey, in the first 5 to 15 minutes, it's going to be yes or no. And if you need to run this by other people, like, let's get them on the phone right now, right? Or if there's a price you need to get, like, let's figure out what that price is before I make my offer. And now we're doing all the objections in the first 40, 50 minutes or sooner versus waiting to the very end of the appointment where you might have wasted 2.5, 3 hours only to find out like they weren't making a decision today. So
I love how, in your training, right, you call it like the pressure, right? You leave a lot of pressure on you and that seller if you wait until the very end to go for that, right? It's like, oh man, like all this bottled up. It's like, no, like you really want to know a lot earlier on so that, hey, I'm not forcing this. You're not pressured. I love how you kind of do that, because it's a flip for most people. It's ask, then go for the contract, then go for the now. But yours is kind of like, hey, are you comfortable to make this decision today? Because if not, I can call you tomorrow.
Yeah,
I don't need this deal.
If I could just touch on something, guys, what is super important, let's not overlook this, is what he said with just setting expectations. Like, this is the way it's going to roll. If we have any problems, let's just take care of it right now, rather than wasting half an hour, 2 hours, whatever that is. And I think that's also applicable within teamwork and other stuff too, right? Steve, where you're like, hey, just set the expectation up front and everybody can get their concerns out on the table from the beginning. And then we just get to things a lot, it's just smoother. Like I said, it's like also I could, reference to say, hey, you got to try to kiss a girl before it's too awkward. Like, hey, right? Otherwise it's like, hey, at the end of the night, it's like, oh, you're going for a kiss. It's like, yo, like, set it a little bit sooner if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other thing too is that the empowering them to say no, right? If you're not empowering them to say no, because everyone has a hard time saying no. Like, as a society, we've been programmed. I know we're kind of getting more broken as a civilization today, but for the most part, we all have a hard time saying no. And so if you don't empower them to say no, then at the end, they don't want to tell you no. It's like, I don't want to tell you no. I'd rather tell you I need to think about it, knowing that as a salesperson, you'll never follow up with me, right? Like, because we as a sales industry, we've trained people that if you tell me you need to call me back call back later. Most salespeople won't, because most salespeople don't follow up. So that's a very legitimate defense against salespeople. And so we empower them to say no in the very beginning so that they will feel comfortable telling us no at the very end. And also we're going to tell them like, hey, I might not buy your house. So now they're thinking, wait a minute, but you called me or you texted me or you emailed me. You told me you're going to buy my house. Now you're telling me in the first 5 minutes, you might not buy my house. I better pay attention. I might have to sell you. And now it's a different situation. So now I was like, Will, I thought I was going to buy your house, but it sounds like what you're looking for, it's not going to work for me. I'm going to head out. I wish you the best of luck. And Will's like, well, no, hang on. Don't leave. Maybe we can work something out. But if I don't say in the very first few minutes that I might tell you no, it's going to be weird when I say later on, like, hey, I should probably go. So I think telling them that we might tell them no, telling them they're allowed to say no, telling them that, hey, if it's a yes, that means we're putting everything in writing today. And I think that the other thing too is when we're not properly setting the expectation, their expectation usually is, why don't you come in, take some photos, give me a number, and I'll call you back. That's how most homeowners think this should go. We want a contract today. So we're drastically different in expectations. So when we're talking about setting expectations, we got to tell them, hey, my expectation is today is going to be yes or no. I'm hoping that's your expectation. If that's not your expectation today, that's okay. But I'm going to go somewhere else. I'm not going to stick around. I'm not here to be your friend.
You're empowering them, right? You're saying, look, if it's not today, it's not today. It doesn't have to be today. I don't want to pressure you.
Exactly.
Love that.
I'm super curious, Steve, how you've been able to go so granular, like in the psychology of the seller and the investors. Like, you must have put a lot of thought into this, as far as like each part of the process. It's off subject a little bit, but I'm like, man, I'm just so curious.
Well, I geeked out on this. I geeked out hard. And again, this was my biggest weakness. Like, I was good at a lot of things. I'm not trying to be bragging, but I did really well in school. Not a lot of people get recruited out of college, for graduate school. Like, you get recruited to play ball, play sports, whatever, but you don't get recruited as a student, right? But I was recruited as a student out of ASU, and I had all these colleges like offer me money to go to their school, right? So I did really well on a lot of things. I'm good at integrating. I'm a pretty good leader. So there's a lot of things I was really good at. But the one thing I was absolutely awful at was sales, because I was an engineer. Right. So I'm very understanding. I understand you to think about it because I want to think about it. And so the reason why I got more granular in this is because I had to. Because of how bad I was. I didn't have charisma. If you look at the disc profile, my eye is all the way at the bottom, a negative, right? I have no charisma. So if I win, it's because you trusted me, and that's great, but that's not enough to run a highly profitable business. So I had to nerd out on sales, because if I didn't, I would be in the same spot as I was. And I did not like where I was.
And you mentioned it, right? Like, you could be a veterinarian, a dentist, an engineer. It doesn't matter. Like, unless you know how to market and sell that you are the best veterinarian in your area, you're still going to end up struggling. So I love how you tied that in, right? That was your worst skill out of the sets. You were a good leader. You were good at integrating. You had all those other components, but again, that doesn't make a difference if you can't market that you have
if
those
you can't
skills,
close.
right?
Yeah. So the two skills you need to start a business is sales and marketing. Marketing, I figured that out because you just read, right? Marketing, it's scientific. You can engineer it, right? PPC, you just read a book, you can make it happen, right? It's not like swimming where you actually need to go in the water to learn it, or skiing. Like, you can just read a book and get good at marketing.
Yep.
Sales, you need to get in there. You need to get punched in the mouth. You need to get beat up. So it's a combination of learning, applying, learning, applying, learning, and applying is how we were able to get to where we are.
And what do you think these newer investors, when they ask you questions, what's the most common questions about, helping them out in the sales strategies that you're answering? Just again, because, most of the tribe is somewhat newer, intermediate, investors. What would you say to that?
So the biggest thing usually is I need to think about it. The other thing is I need to talk to an attorney, realtor, accountant. There's a lot of that. Or, why should I go with you? Like, this offer's higher. I think those are probably the biggest challenges people have. And, someone says, like, oh, I want this much. I was like, that's fantastic. What did the realtor say when you told me you wanted that much? Like, I haven't talked to a realtor because, and they'll say, well, because I don't want to deal with realtors. Like, but they're great. Like, realtors are awesome people. Why would you not want to talk to a realtor? And like, no, realtors suck. Let me tell you why. Versus me saying, hey, you don't want to go with a realtor. Realtors are terrible. They're going to be this and that. And they're like, yeah, whatever. I'll go with a realtor. Right. So us telling them, go with a realtor, go with an attorney, go with this or that. They're like, no, I don't want to do all that. I want this done. So by us pushing really hard to not use us, they want to use us. Versus us closing them on how awesome we are. They're like, well, you're a salesperson. I can't trust you. So I think that's one of the biggest things. The other thing is, your price is really low. It's like, hey, I get it, right? So before I'd be like, well, what do we need to be at? And we're like arguing on numbers. I'm telling you, like, well, the windows, the roof, and I got to replace the carpet and paint and the kitchen and this and that. And I'm like talking numbers, and all you're doing is you're insulting them the whole time. Like, you're like, your house sucks, right? Let me tell you how your house sucks. A, B, C, and D. And we're offending them. Versus now it's like, hey, look, you got time and money. If I was in your position, I would ask for more money too. So, what do the realtors say? And then again, it's them like, well, I don't want to go with that. It's like, well, we're not plan A. Let me tell you right now, we're not plan A. We're usually not even plan B, right? We're an insurance policy. If you've exhausted all your options, we're here for you. But if you got time and money, go leverage your time and money. And then this is where they convince themselves to work with us. Like, I think one of the things that people think is that you can negotiate on a $200,000 house. You can negotiate $50,000, right? And the reality is, I don't believe that you can. But what you can do is you can get them to convince themselves why they should lower 50,000, right? And that's the skills that we teach, is how to get them to convince themselves. Versus us is like, look, carpet, paint, closing costs, realtor fees, this and that. I have to make money. They don't care about you. No one cares about you, right? So once we got away from like talking about itemizing and talking about like, hey, you got a beautiful house, like, just, I'm sure it will sell, it's no big deal, go ahead and list it. Then they're like, no, what price do we have to be so that you'll buy my house? And I was doing that on accident initially. I had no idea, right? I had no idea the first few houses I bought, because I was taking away. I was like, no, you don't want me to buy your house. You want to list it. You'll make more money this way. I was doing that. I just didn't realize what I was doing that was working at that time.
Gotcha.
So Steve, like Alex mentioned, we got a lot of, beginning kind of intermediate investors here in the room. And we always have a good amount of people that are in that realtor stage, right? They might not be a broker like you were at the time, but maybe they're a realtor and they're trying to make that transition, or they are actively making that transition. Can you kind of describe like your end, how you've been able to make that transition, and like how you've been able to kind of, we always call it like the investor hat versus the realtor hat. Like how did you go about playing both of those and making that transition?
Yeah. And I think this is a fantastic question. So I was, right, for a very long time, a solopreneur. So I would go in and I would meet with Will, right? And at this time, I didn't know about setting expectations. So I would just meet with Will and I would just go over your scenario, right? And just talk to you. And then find out, like, do you need to sell today, or like you're trying to get the most amount of money, right? So I would just sit down and talk to you and just understand what's going on in your world. And once I understand what's going on in your world, I was like, hey, Will, it kind of sounds like you're trying to get the most amount of money for your home. And then you'd be like, yeah, I'm not an idiot. It's like, hey, I just want to make sure, can I show you how we do that? And I would pivot to a listing appointment. But I would say, hey, Will, it sounds like you need this taken care of right away. And they're like, yeah, have you been paying attention? Hey, I just wanted to make sure. And I would pivot to a cash offer. But I wouldn't pivot until they told me, or I was able to uncover what solution they needed. And once I uncovered the solution they needed, then I labeled it just to confirm I was going the right direction.
And we talked about this too, right? Like, beginning investors, you want to take those appointments. You want to get face-to-face with those sellers, because, that's how you get better at diagnosing what that problem is. I love how you said that too, Steve, right? It's you get them to come out and be like, well, no, this is what I need. And, again, I hate to run the cliche line, but I use this as well. Like it's Steve thing. It's like, hey man, when you do that reversal on them and you get them to realize like, oh yeah, no, I do want you to sell my house. Like it's it really gets them to lead themselves to water as opposed to the other way around, right?
And once they say it,
Easier for them to believe it. Yeah, it's truth now.
right. Now it's gospel. Now it's gospel. Can't argue with
it. You said that. Yep. We're going off of that.
Right.
So guys, I know we have, about 50 people here in the room, and we've got a couple more questions that we're going to go through with Steve, and then we want to open it up to you guys. So if you guys here in the audience have a question, feel free to go ahead and use the Q&A feature, not the chat feature, but there's a little Q&A button down there at the bottom. And if you guys have a question for Steve about anything we're kind of talking about today about sales, this guy is obviously one of the top sales guys out there, and he had to work at it to get there. So it wasn't like he was naturally gifted with this stuff. He had to work at it. So I know we were kind of talking about, right, like the reason why you worked at it, right? You wanted to work at sales because it doesn't matter if you're a good engineer. It doesn't matter if you're a good realtor. You have to brand yourself as a great realtor that people want to come to. How have you kind of gone about branding yourself, right? Like there's Steve Trang, there's disruptors, there's your coaching. How has that affected you, and the podcast as well? Like how have those helped your branding?
It's funny. I am the same exact human being I was when I started the podcast in 2018. The difference is people know who I am, right? So as far as branding goes, that's really was just putting myself out there, making myself uncomfortable. Kind of like a lot of what, Ryan Benita has done, right? And we compare notes a lot, have regular conversations, but the branding is just putting content out there so people know who I am. Now that I've done the branding, it's boosted everything. Opportunities that are available to me would not have been available to me had I not had the podcast, right? I mean, we recently got acquired by InvestorLift. That's not happening without a podcast. Our title company, we're doing things that I got people that want to invest in it. Wouldn't have happened without the podcast. I am in Collective Genius, right? As a vendor for sales training. Doesn't happen without the podcast. And because I'm in Collective Genius, we're closing on an apartment complex, I think tomorrow. And then I invested in a bank, like these things don't happen.
These are all things that wouldn't have landed on the table if you weren't out there branding, weren't out there marketing yourself, right?
Exactly. So there are things that doors open because we're documenting, and like a lot of people like overthink documenting, right? Like, or content. But the reality is you don't have to be great. You just have to do it. Zig Ziglar is, you don't have to be great to start, but you have to start to be great. So if you'll just document, you'll be in a really good situation. But most people are like overthinking, what do I document? For us, something as simple as one transaction, a Instagram post of, hey, we're going to this appointment. An Instagram post of, here's how the appointment went. An Instagram post is, who wants this deal? A Instagram post of a DocuSign between us and whoever the end buyer is. A Instagram post of when we closed it. The email of closing. An Instagram post of the HUD. That's 6 stories of one transaction. There's no shortage of opportunities.
This like on an agent side of things, right? As an agent, you put in your sign on the thing, you get a picture, you get an Instagram. But for you, those are opportunities to create stories, to create documentation. Again, like that, like you said, put your brand out there. So I love that because, like you said, one house can really create. And you went soft there. Like you could have probably had, hey, I'm meeting a contractor out there. I'm meeting a termite guy out there. I'm meeting a landscaper out there. There's hundreds of different ways that you can create content from that one piece. And every time you document something, and again, it pushes your brand, pushes your portfolio, pushes your name out there. So like you said, I think that podcast has been very beneficial for you then, right?
Oh, absolutely. It's been huge. And people, it's not like people don't want to do business with you. It's that people don't know you. So they can't do business with you if you're not out there, right? Like, do I get referred by other people, outside of social media? Yeah. But I get people reaching out to me about opportunities because I put myself out there, right? Like, again, going back to that sales training, when I was referred into the Collective Genius as a sales trainer, I had my program out there and people were aware of it, but they had no idea it was any good. But because I was talking about it consistently on the podcast, when they're asking around, Gary Harper's like, why don't you just reach out to Steve Trang? He's got a sales training program. And that was it, right? It was because Gary's never even heard me do sales training. He just knew I did it and he liked me as a person. That was it. So you got to brand yourself.
Yeah, and Alex, we're talking about how branding of a podcast or just getting yourself out there can get you opportunities. And I mean, we talk about it all the time on your level as well, right, Alex? Like, because you're on Instagram, because you're posting what you're doing on Instagram, we get multiple deals every year that come through just documenting what it is that we've been doing, right? So I mean, not putting yourself out there is only really a disadvantage, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's just the new business card, as I think Ryan puts it a lot in, and it's kind of like you're working that over the long term. Like, that's not something you develop over one day. It's like, okay, well, you are about this, and you're throwing it out there to the world, and you're building a brand, and you're evolving your brand. As we have, the whole deal makers thing just came about because I wanted to be a little bit different. So I'm just like, hey, dude, what's up, my deal makers? I just wanted to be a little bit different. I moved to Hawaii, then I'm like, oh, aloha, my deal makers, and just people kind of just stuck. But part of all of it has been that we want to be known as investors in Southern California. So you have to kind of build out that brand and that entity of like, hey, this is a buying entity, as one of my mentors put it so well. Once you're known as that, it's kind of just a compound interest over time. And you're like, wow, you're getting this returns for this stuff that you've done like a year ago, 2 years ago. Someone that you met, that you influenced a year and a half ago, then you all of a sudden do a deal together. There's just so much of that we've seen with what we've been building that we continue to double down on that because it's working. So we just share with because I know for a fact, a lot of successful people or investors in our kind of network, but they might not necessarily have the biggest brands yet. So, they're working on that, right? Because they're already successful investors. Well, imagine you throw some type of brand on top of that, a branding. I mean, sky's the limit. If you really look at, Steve, all the big names out there, people know who they are. So and if they have products to sell or they have some type of services to offer, then simply them knowing that, and then you might be a potential customer down the road. Like I always liked Steve, so I knew eventually I was gonna probably do something with them. And then we got the opportunity to go to his sales training. I was so for it because I already knew I had already gotten so much value. It was a no-brainer. Okay, cool. Couple thousand or whatever, the $3,000, whatever it was at the time, just boom, we did it because the brand was there and we had already got a lot of value from it. So
right, you already knew who I was. And that's like if you look at the people that say, hey, you know what? I need a buyer in this area. Well, why don't you reach out to Will Wall, right? And they're like, who's Will Wall? And they might Google it. And then when they Google him, it's like, oh, he's active on Instagram. Let me see what he's posting on Instagram. Okay, this guy's a real buyer, right? Versus like, all right, let me look up Will Wall. Oh, there's nothing on him online. Do I really want to work with this guy?
Yeah, I don't know. I think we need someone with a little more experience here or something.
Yeah, it's like, is this guy brand new? Like, what's the situation here? And so
you had your training program out there, right? So it's like it's already been out there, but it's that people who knew you spoke highly of you because of their past business with you, and that's how you end up on a stage like a Collective Genius, right? It wouldn't have been if you wouldn't have already had that content out there. That was your kind of your token card into that group. So, I love that. Talking about Collective Genius, kind of on the subject. What do you think has maybe been your biggest like kind of accelerator? Like if you had to choose one thing that was just like, this was the gas on the fire, like, was it the podcast? Was it shifting into investing? Was it, stepping out of the business and hiring the right people into the right seats? Like what was that biggest accelerator that you've seen across your businesses and growth?
So I could think of three very specific things. One is the podcast, right? I mean, I think that's one of the biggest things. Second is the personal development. So specifically, Insane Productivity. It's a Darren Hardy course. It's $2,000. I'm putting my team through it again. I've gone through it 8 times. Wow. But it's the best time management training out there. So again, I'm putting my whole team through it again. And then I think it's just working on my leadership skills, because that is the skill that allows you to leave the business. Like I remember I read the Millionaire Real Estate Agent by Gary Keller, right? And he talks about the 7th level agent, which is you're not in the business anymore. I was like, man, that would be so cool if I can do that one day. And it freaking happened, right? And it happened because of the leadership component. So I think investing in leadership, starting a podcast, time management, and I mean, masterminds obviously are helpful too, but that stuff doesn't happen without those three pivotal things.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I love the Blue Bible and the Red Bible by Gary Keller. Like those are great, great books. You know, that just an absolute handbook, right? And I love that piece, right? Because it's grow the business, build the $1 billion business, sell that, and then move yourself out of that business. So yeah, I think that, you know, again, looking at this is something that if you're a beginning investor on the call right now, like that's the trick on how to do it, right? Is continue to invest in yourself. I know that was one of the things Steve said, is investing in personal training. And invest in branding, right? Because that was the podcast. So I think those are the two biggest things that helped you kind of hit that third accelerator. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Those are the biggest
and
things.
I want to say something real quick to that, you know, from the outside looking in and when you're kind of starting out, you're like, oh, how could I ever, like you said, right? How could I ever get to that level where I won't have to do all the details? I won't have to do some of the stuff that I don't like to do. But it really is a progression over time. And then it's like you've built so much value during that time. You've built some great leaders within your organization, like Will, like he's the leader. Amari is the leader. Kayvon, all these people that we have inside of our group, they're leaders coming up. And then those people are more than capable. And then you build something big enough where everybody can eat and everybody has some, you know, some upside potential. And that's where you're able to earn a bit more of your freedom. Like, I mean, in some cases that I would say I'm kind of getting there where it's like, okay, I am no longer working in some of these detailed stuff. And, but that's because everybody else now is capable and they're trained up. And I have worked a lot of my leadership this year, which hasn't been natural for me. It's been by far the hardest thing I've ever had to do. I know how to sell. I know how to present. I know how to hustle, but leading people to victory has not been like easy. And I don't know if Steve can agree. And if, but Will, you're more of a natural leader than I am, my man. So I'm glad I got you on the team, baby. Let's go.
Yeah, and I saw something great yesterday. You know, it was an interview where the guy's like, you know, it was a boy on a horse and he was in a forest, and he was like, he was complaining to the horse like, I don't know where to go. Right? It was foggy. He was in a forest. I don't know where to go. And the horse says, well, do you know where the next step is? And he's like, yeah. He's like, well, then take the next step. And that's it, right? You just got to keep plodding forward. If you keep plodding forward, you will get there. You don't have to know how to get there today. You just have to know what direction to go.
Yep.
So I know we got a couple other selfish questions we wanted to kind of ask, and you know, one of them, you know, being obviously, you know, running a podcast, right? So, you know, what's kind of the single hardest thing that you've found in running a podcast? I know that's kind of like you said, your biggest focus now. You've stepped out of the other businesses, so it's pretty much, you know, podcast and coaching are your two biggest things. So what's the hardest part of those?
I think the hardest thing, it wasn't hard for me because thankfully I have friends in the business. But the hardest thing probably for some people is to be able to find a production that can do your show without your involvement. So like right now I'm back at Lister Pros, you know, we just did our podcast here right before this call. You know, here's the microphone. I'm in their studio and this is my friend's studio, you know, and the only reason we're back here is because my studio's under construction because we're going full Joe Rogan over here. But I would say that finding a place to do a podcast where someone is doing all the work is probably the hardest thing. I mean, I was paying $200 an episode, right? But I was in a position where I could do it. But I would say like, there's a book by Dan Sullivan, Who Not How. Like, there's so many people like, well, how do I do a podcast? You know, what microphone do I get? What kind of you know, sound insulators, whatever, cameras, microphones, lighting, all these things, right? But those are all the wrong questions. The question is, who can I hire to help me do the podcast?
There you go.
And once you find that person, it's done, right? So for me, it wasn't hard because I had a friend that already had a podcast. I was like, hey, I want to use your studio. How much is it? He's like $200 an episode. Done. I didn't even know it came with a producer. I had no idea. Like, how awesome was that? Like, that was included. I just wanted to use the studio. So I didn't have to bring anybody else in. That was included. So I'd say probably the hardest part is who, but once you figure that out, the rest of it's pretty easy.
Awesome. Great answer, Steve.
Yeah, I love that. And again, we want to try and find things that people on the call can connect with. And I know a lot of folks in here obviously are in the same position as you, right, Steve? They have a family, a growing family, or looking to start a family. So I'd love to just get like one little, piece of advice you might have in terms of how you've been able to stay so grounded and, leading so many different businesses while still being able to, keep the most important thing in there, which is, obviously your family first, right?
I'm glad you brought up that question, because that tells me I got to leave in 10 minutes. So I take them to Kung Fu lessons. So I think the biggest thing is boundaries. I grew up, right? I'm the oldest of 6 boys, immigrant, right? Like I wasn't born in the United States, where time with my family was not something we had, right? Like my parents busted their butts. They were both working 60, 80 hours a week, literally. I'm not exaggerating, 60, 80 hours a week, so that they can raise 6 boys, right? So time with my family, it's not something I had. So, growing up, we all think like when I get older, here are things I liked from my parents that I'm going to make sure I do. Here are things I didn't like that my parents did that I'm going to do differently. And so my parents were never there. And it wasn't because they didn't want to, it's just they had to do what they had to do. So I remember my dad only went to one of my basketball games ever. And the only time he did, he brought a newspaper. I was like, come on, right? But what that taught me was like, when I grow up, and I have a family, I'm going to be there at every single event, every single opportunity. And so I always made a commitment that I'm going to spend time with my family, with my kids, and I'm going to be there for them. And then even further, when I had my first or second daughter, someone gave me a book, which was, it was something father, something strong fathers, strong daughters. And it talked about the importance of having a father in their lives. Because if they don't have fathers, like they're not going to have great lives, And so that I made even a stronger commitment to be a better father and better husband. And so for me, I time block, like literally on my calendar, it says I need to be here at this time so I can take them to piano lessons, to Kung Fu lessons.
I was going to say, you had kind of Kung Fu today, right? So it's like,
Yeah.
like, hey, I'm not missing Kung Fu lessons. Like that's my commitment. I'm going to be there. I love that.
Yeah, so it's in my Google Calendar. No one could book anything over it. Like they can't, because it's already there. Like you can't accidentally book anything over it because it's already there. So, if you block off time with your family, you can fit everything else around it. But if you block time with your business and try to fit in your family, it doesn't find a place. And so, something Darren Hardy said is most people plan their business and they fit their family around it, and it doesn't work. But if you plan your life and your family and you fit your business around it, it works. And so I think going in there with a massive intention and focus, you can do it. I'm not saying I do it perfectly. I try to do everything in under 45 hours a week. Some weeks I go over, but I've been pretty intent on working less than 45 hours a week. I want to say for coming up on 8 years now, 8 or 9 years.
That's awesome, Steve.
Again, like I said, gotta respect it, because family, obviously comes first, and the way that, like you said, like, you came from a different kind of upbringing and you wanted to kind of switch that around for your kids. So I think that's huge. Neither Alex and I have kids, but, again, we wanted to kind of ask that question because I know a lot of our, deal makers here in the tribe are in that position where it's like, hey, how do I balance, both of those things and still.
Well, you might not have kids, but you might have a wife or you might have a girlfriend. And
they need time.
The big point of it is like, you need to make your life, the life you really want to live, and what's important to you, and build around that rather than just fitting in after hustling and making money. It's like, so for me, it's a travel aspect of it. I don't have kids, but I just like to travel often, and and that's it. So I have to make that a priority, otherwise it won't happen. I'll just be in LA, in Compton, looking at houses all day long. That's what I'll be doing. So I don't want to be doing that anymore. Like, Will can do that now.
Well, and there's a great quote, right? I want them to have the best of me, not the rest of me. So just think about that.
I'll write that
best
down.
of me, not the rest of me. I was going to say, if you guys are writing something down, that might be the big takeaway right there. Because again, family obviously comes first, and we want to make sure that when we continue to grow and the rest of the people in the tribe continue to grow their families, that they're able to do that first. So Alex, I know we got a couple more questions on our end. Let's kind of pick one more, and then we'll go to an attendee question and wrap this thing up here in a couple minutes. For me, if we were to ask one of the last two questions on here, I'd love to know a little bit more about your masterminds, right? So, like Alex and I, we attend some masterminds, right? We're going to go to one next week with Ryan Pineda's. We obviously came out and visited yours and did the sales training with you, Steve. So how do you, choose which masterminds you're going to be a part of? Because obviously you're really well connected. How are you kind of finding which ones to prioritize and take precedence with?
That was funny because I was not planning on joining Collective Genius. Like they had reached out to me. Ryan Pineda had told me, Colin Lee told me like, hey, you need to join this. Like, nah, I don't want to take any time away with my family. So the only reason why I joined it was because I was a vendor. I was like, well, now I have to go, right? And thank God I did, because it's been incredibly impactful for my business. But for me, the things that I'm looking at is how much time do I have to take away from my family and what's the potential ROI. So I'm gonna look at who's in there. I'm gonna see what they can do to help grow my business. Like I said earlier, I'm naturally antisocial, introverted. I'm not out there. So if I'm gonna go, it has to make sense for business reasons. I'm not going for fun. I don't need to go anywhere for fun, right? I'm good where I'm at. I am totally fine just sitting at home. So it has to be a big business win, right? So when Ryan asked me to go out to speak at his events, like, okay, that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
But for the most part, if I'm going to decide which ones to go to, it has to be ones that make massive sense.
Yeah. Well, my final question really, guys, is just like, what is it that you think we could do for you, Steve, if you need help? I mean, obviously you don't need a lot of help from me, but if there's anything that our tribe, or if you want to go, this is your chance to talk to them about what you do, what you got coming up, anything that we could help you out on.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, we got a workshop coming up in a month, 6 weeks, I think. If you guys are interested, it's disruptors.com/workshop. If you guys want to come, great. If you guys don't, man, it's fine, right? Like we're going to be okay. So it's I think that our goal is still to create millionaires. So that is the core focus. And if people want to be part of our journey, and that's the thing, you don't have to buy anything to be part of our journey, right? But if you were so inclined, you could, right? We can get you there a little bit faster. But all in all, everyone's going to do well on their own volition, on their own deeds, right? I am only here potentially as a guide.
Awesome. Well, you guys heard it. He has a workshop coming up in 6 weeks. Will and I went to it.
Went to the workshop, Alex. We got a lot of value out of it. Fire workshop, right? So I mean, I can't speak enough about it. And Alex and I have our sales game. We would like to think that we're pretty good at it, but man, we went out and a lot to learn there.
Yes, sir. And obviously, big shout out to Max Jimenez. Your partner on that, and he was he was amazing. All the stuff he shared with us and everything he taught us along with that workshop. I know it's you mainly teaching it, but Max is right there adding the value, talking to the attendees. Just helping everybody with their challenges and what they got going on. So big shout out to Max for helping us.
Yeah, incredible blessing to have him as a partner.
And Steve, I know you touched on it, and there was a great question in here from the audience. You mentioned you're not naturally, talkative, you're not naturally social, you're a little bit more introverted. One of the attendees asked that he kind of suffers from social anxiety and he's stuck at that part of communicating with people. Do you have any tips or exercises on how to become more comfortable in that aspect of things? Because like you said, not everybody is naturally, in that set of shoes, right?
So before I got married, right, I would go out dating, right, go out to the clubs, whatever. And there was a rule. And the rule was, if you see a girl you like, you don't wait more than 3 seconds to go say hi to her. Because if you wait more than 3 seconds, you're not gonna say hi to her, right? I see Alex nodding. I think he knows, right?
The 3-second rule.
3-second rule. It's the same exact thing. Like you just gotta go, right? Don't think about it. The more you think about it, the more you're gonna talk yourself out of it. So I think for me is just the desire to win, desire to the willingness to be uncomfortable to win, and just 1, 2, 3, do it. You don't have to be brave all day. You just need to be brave a few times a day, right? Well, like you gotta dialer. Just hold your breath, hit the start button, and then you just let it do its thing. But hitting that start button is really hard. Once, right? You don't have to hit the start button again the rest of the day. You just have to hit it once, and then the rest of it will just go.
I love it. Cool. Well, I think we're wrapping up here. We have any last question? We have Steve. His time's valuable. He's got to go home to his family. He's dropped some fire.
Yeah, I love that. Steve's got to go to the Kung Fu lesson, right? Like cannot negotiate with that time. I know time blocking is something that we do regularly, Alex, but if anybody has any last minute takeaways, feel free to share it now. If not, again, we are truly appreciative of your time, Steve. And I know I took a lot of good takeaways today and from your training that we went to recently. So can't wait to come back out and see you again soon, man.
Sounds good. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Guys, we
Thanks, Bless.
appreciate you, man. Steve, keep disrupting, all right?
All right. See you later.
We'll catch you
All
on the
right,
flip
guys.
side.
See you, deal makers. Let's go.
Guys, we'll see anybody else out next week in Vegas if you're out there, all right? Let's go.